Hello YouTube. So I wanted to do a video on hope. Hope has as a concept has a very interesting history. The Greeks had four virtues, right? I think they come from Aristotle. Wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Now, with the rise of Christianity, we see St. Paul add three virtues to that list. The three virtues that he adds are hope, faith, and love. I think that we as atheists have perhaps a little bit too much. We don't spend enough time thinking through affect, right? Hope is, I think for most of the atheist community, they would say something like hope is a feeling or something like that, or just a feeling. But I want to see if I can clear that away. See if I can kind of present an articulation of hope that, on the one hand, is actually quite Christian, but on the other hand, is provides a rebuttal to that idea. Now, I've done videos on faith before. Maybe I'll do another one, and maybe I'll do one on love, because I think that the Christian virtues are interesting. I think the discourse around the Christian virtues are interesting, and I think that we as atheists tend to have a fairly uninteresting reading of what those mean and how those operate and all of this. First thing I want to say is that all three of these categories are not epistemic, right? They're not tied to knowledge, right? I think that that's a mistake that we tend to make about faith. Faith is not some proposition being elevated to the status of knowledge without reason, right? And I just don't think that that's historically what it is. Maybe I'll get into that in a later video, as I said. Hope is not an epistemic category either. It's an existential category. And I think all three, hope, faith, and love, have political implications. And that's where I find them to be especially interesting, right? They are political potentials immanent within them. Yes. So where do we begin with talking about hope? I'm going to draw a little bit on Gabriel Marcel, but I think I'm going to do something different with it than what he does. I want to say that there are two basic modes of hope. There's what I would call positive hope, and then there's negative hope. Right? Now, positive hope would be, I hope that something happens. Right? Marcel gives the example. I think it's, I hope that Paul makes it in time for lunch. Right? That's an affirmation, right? It's you are articulating a concrete situation, and which is a positive thing. Positive in the philosophical sense, not positive as in like, yeah, we're all happy or something like that. But it's a positive, concrete situation, and then you are affirming that, right? So it's positive in the sense that it's an affirmation. And I think that this is the weakest form of hope. I think that this is the least interesting form of hope. But it's a hope that's tied to a concrete situation and can therefore be falsified. And again, we're not talking epistemically, so falsification has a different thrust here than it does in the sciences or something, right? What do I mean by negative hope? This is what I think Christian hope really is, and this is what I think, where I think hope can become politically interesting. Negative hope is not I hope that X, but rather just simply I hope, right? In some way, it can be conceived of as longing for deliverance from a certain situation. You could imagine being a slave and hope for deliverance, right? You're not conceiving in that situation of a concrete positive outcome necessarily, but rather you are hoping that something is negated, being your slavery. In this sense, under this side, hope is not something that can be falsified. And in this sense, it's not a naive hope, right? This is what's interesting. This is what's extreme, or part of what's extremely interesting to me about Christianity, is that Christianity is very self-aware about its own impossibility. So this is not hope in some possible outcome. This is hope in the face of a concrete set of possibilities. In this sense, we can imagine a hope that is transcendent. We can imagine a hope that is beyond some set of material circumstances, that isn't bound to the finitude of your situation. Right? Now, you can obviously theologize this, right? This is obviously a theological concept in a certain way. What I want to try and do is kind of to materialize that, right? So how do we do that? And I think that we can do it existentially again. Derrida has this distinction, or he points out this distinction between, in French, there are two words for future, one which roughly translates to future, which would be something like, tomorrow I'm going to get up and go to work, and I'm going to have this for lunch, and I have plans with these people to go out to dinner, and blah, 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 right? The other is to come, that which is to come, right? To come would be something like, I start going about that plan, and I get hit by a bus, right? The to come is an otherness. It's the unpredictability, the incalculability of the future. Something, I can't take information about my concrete present and extrapolate it out into the to come, right? Given the idea that there is a future that is unknown, that can interrupt our conception of what the future will be, that opens up the space for hope to operate, right? I don't mean to say that that provides grounds for hope or something like that, right? But it opens up the space within which we can talk about such a thing. That transcendence allows us, or affords us, the capability to dream, to imagine, and to think beyond our concrete material circumstances, and to even do so into impossibility, right? So Adorno has a wonderful, wonderful line, which I'm sure I've referenced before, where he says something like, thought that does not decapitate itself flows into a world wherein which not only all extant suffering is abolished, but that all past suffering may be revoked, right? So this is a utopian hope, right? But it's not just a utopian hope, it's an impossible hope. Why would we want to think the impossible, right? This is what's so interesting existentially and politically about the idea of utopia, particularly from Adorno's perspective, is that utopia is impossible. Utopia is something that if some conception of society were to be realized, it would no longer be utopia, right? So it's not something that is material, it's something that's a dream. Always. It's always a dream. Hope gives us the capacity, in its very negativity, in the very fact that it's a denial, hope gives us the ability to think past a politics of the lesser evil, right? We can think our way into an emancipatory politics. So why would you want to do that, right? You might say, if such a thing is impossible. Well, it creates an interesting vantage point. Simon Critchley has a beautiful line where he talks about utopianism, and he conceives of utopia as being within what he calls a double meontological demand. Meontology is the study of non-being, right? Or he says elsewhere to embrace a double nihilism, right? And how he articulates this is fascinating. He says something like, it is the capacity to see that which is not in that which is, and the capacity to view that which is from the viewpoint of that which is not yet. This is what hope allows us to do, I think. It allows us to construct a vantage point beyond the politically pragmatic, beyond the finite material circumstance that we find ourselves in. It puts us in a space where we have the capacity to refuse our limitations. There's something inherently subversive in that. It allows us to look at the forms of bondage and domination within society as being something contingent rather than something necessary. And this, for me, is the crux, or that which is ultimately important about the Christian view of hope, right? Hope is not, in this way, merely just a feeling or something, right? It becomes something that's extremely important, extremely imperative. In some way, there can be no movement without some notion of hope, a negative hope, a hope that denies the finitude of our confined situation. So yeah, comments, subscribe, have a good day.